Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Knight Shyamalan.
But a lot of nice Shyamalans going around here right now.
There's a few.
We are taking a stab this week at the new horror thriller, kind of sci-fi fantasy. It's a little, it dips into a lot of different genres, called The Watchers.
The Watchers, released in June of 2024, starring Dakota Fanning as Mina, Georgina Campbell as Kira, Olwen Forer as Madeline, and Oliver Finnegan as Daniel. And as you mentioned, Damon, yes, written and directed by Ishana Night Shyamalan. Of course, the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan, one of the most prolific directors in genre film today.
Yes, M. Night Shyamalan. We've only done on this show, Knock at the Cabin. Yeah,
Knock at the Cabin, I believe.
Knock at the Cabin, yeah. That's the only one of his now. I've said many years, and again, I want to be clear, like, this is Ishana Night Shyamalan's movie, and I know Patrick Night Shyamalan and Damon Night Shyamalan have watched a lot of M. Night Shyamalan movies over the years. Even though we really haven't reviewed them on this show, we've talked about our love and adoration of a lot of his movies. Now, I'm not going to say I love them all. They're not all great, but, generally speaking, I've said on this show many times, I think the only director in my personal pantheon that has never had a miss is Quentin Tarantino. So every director I have enjoyed has had a couple of, you don't bat 1,000 is what I'm saying. You're going to strike out a couple times.
Martin Scorsese was in director jail for many, many years. Like, people forget that. There was a big gap between Taxi Driver and Goodfellas. He did stuff, but, he wasn't doing stuff that was lighting the world on fire. And now, of course, he's one of the greatest who's ever lived.
And that's like a 12-year gap, by the way. That's not like a small gap. Taxi Driver was 79, 80, and then in Goodfellas was 91. So, that's a good long time.
Yeah, and there were some questionable movies in the middle of that. You know what I mean? Like, all directors have that. Now, you're right, Damon. We're not talking about M. Night tonight. We're talking about Ishana, right? Ishana Night Shyamalan decided to tell this story, The Watchers. Damon, sometimes my own habits bite me in the ass. If you listen to this podcast long term, you might know that I don't like to know anything about movies going in. I love to go in ice cold as best I can. I may have seen one trailer for The Watchers a while back, and it was barely memorable. I could barely remember it, but I knew it was coming out. I knew there was a lot of buzz around it. And this is one of those instances where I probably would have benefited from doing a little research. I did know it was Ishana Shyamalan's movie. So I was like, oh, that's cool. I wonder how involved her dad is. Turns out he's the top billed producer. So they downplay it, but the truth is he's definitely there. But that's actually not what I needed to prepare myself for. I needed to prepare myself for the fact that this was indeed adapted from a YA novel. Do you want to take us through a little bit of what that's all about? Because if I'd known that, perhaps my brain would have been wired a little differently for this movie.
So this is based upon a book by an Irish author named A.M. Shine. That is actually his name. And he's from Galway, Ireland, and all of his stories, he actually graduated with a degree in history. So all of his novels kind of have that little tinge of history, a little bit of Irish history kind of interlaced in his books. He has another book called The Creeper, which now to be fair about this, I've not read his novels. I just looked it up and done the research because this was coming out. I wouldn't have had time to read it before the movie came out anyway. So I was already kind of just like, I'm not going to try to read it at this point. But reading everything I've read and all the reviews I've read online is that he has a very, historical tinge on all of his books. He adds in that little bit of historical folklore of Irish folklore into his books. And The Creeper and The Watcher are his two feature-length books, and he has a couple of short story anthologies out there as well, and those are also based in Ireland in terms of the storytelling. And The Creeper, takes place in a village. It kind of sounds similar to The Watcher, in the middle of nowhere, and it's almost like the land that time forgot kind of thing. And there's a mysterious creature that kind of haunts the village, which sounds very M. Night Shyamalan. And then The Watchers the premise is very similar to what you see in the movie. There's this structure in the middle of the woods somewhere. These four people are trapped inside, and they are trapped in there by these creatures who come to visit them at night and watch them and study them. and look at them through a window that you can't really see. You can only see a mirror on their side, but on the outside, it's a window looking in, like almost like a police station where you have like the two-way mirror or the one way. Is it one way or two-way mirror, whatever?
One-way mirror, yeah.
One-way mirror. So they see in, you can't see out. And so, yeah, these are folklore, Irish folklore stories. Really, I mean, that's really what he's telling. He's telling modern Irish folklore stories.
Yeah, and I got the feeling pretty early on in this movie that, well, I guess I should back up a little bit. We talked about Imaginary a little earlier in the year, which was kind of a buzzy movie coming from Blumhouse. And we were like, all right, we're gonna talk about Imaginary. We sat down to watch Imaginary, and we were like, what the fuck is this? Like, we were really baffled by the way it was presented. It was a really talky, very heady, not heady, it's just a very talky movie, explained everything to death. And then we found out afterwards that indeed this was a movie that was intended for young audiences. It was actually intended for very young audiences, like teen, preteen type audiences. And I was like, oh God, that makes a lot of sense now why that movie is the way it is. Because it was like frustratingly obtuse. And I was like, why is it being like that? This movie, I would say probably from the part in the trailer, which is when Elle Fanning's character, Mina, ends up in that room. Like when that part hits, it gets very talky. And I was like, oh boy, they are talking this movie to death. Why are they doing it? And it probably was like deep in the maybe late second act when I was like, oh my God, this is one of those movies. This is like a YA novel or something. Because every time something happened in this movie, one of the characters would kind of like just literally stop to explain it. And I go, oh, I remember this. This happened with Imaginary. The same exact shit happened with Imaginary. So instead of me just getting like irate and angry, I was like, now I know what I'm in. I wish I had known that way before. If I'd have been like, oh, this is adapted from a YA novel that's getting pretty popular, then I would have known what to sit down for and known that it would have been presented to me a better way. So I kind of changed gears late in the movie. Probably this movie's an hour and 45, probably at about the halfway point. I changed my attitude and I was like, okay, now I need to understand that they're doing world building for a specific audience level, and they're hoping that the rest of us who watch tons and tons of movies don't give a shit that they're just explaining this movie to death, because that's honestly the experience for a lot of the time. Hopefully, if you're hearing this right now and you were curious about The Watchers but you haven't seen it yet, know that going in. Know that it's certainly an adaptation of a YA novel that is trying to attract, Damon, what is becoming an increasingly difficult demographic to grab for movie theaters, which is younger people under the age of like 20. It's getting harder and harder to tell them like, hey, go to the movie theaters. It's expensive to go to the movies. And so young people aren't going to spend like $20 per ticket and then another 20 at concessions to go see a movie. They, like, Damon, when you were 18, $40 was kind of a big deal. You know, it didn't matter how much money you made at the time. You're just like, $40, that's a lot. And so they're trying to bring those audiences in. This is one of those movies.
Yeah, and here's the thing. So I didn't know specifically how this film was set up. I mean, I knew it was based on a book, and I knew the premise of the book and the premise of the movie were dead on the same. There's no real difference. Now, I haven't read the book, as I mentioned earlier, but I have read a lot of reviews for the book. And so I had I wanted to kind of get a general sense of like how readers felt about the book, so I have a better understanding of how viewers of the movie might feel about the movie, because it sounds like, and again, I'm saying sounds like, I haven't read it, so I don't know. It sounds like they are fairly similar in terms of story, plot, and tone. That being said, the only way I knew going in that this was going to be a movie that was going to talk me to death, which is the way I've kind of come in now, and I know it's been well documented on this show, Patrick, I have a bad tendency to prejudge PG-13 horror films.
Yes.
Now, I've been open and honest and said that I've changed my opinion a lot in recent years because there have been better PG-13 horror films, because I'm a big believer in you don't need blood and gore and guts and to make a great horror film. Do I enjoy Terrifier 2? Do I enjoy When Evil Lurks? Absolutely. Do I need that to make it scary? No. I mean, it doesn't, you can absolutely make a very taut, scary thriller without a drop of blood. I mean, You know, when I know it's a totally different movie, but we've talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It doesn't really have like hardly any gore at all in that movie, but it's one of
Yeah.
the most terrifying, greatest horror films of all time. So it's not even built around that part. You know what I mean? Like I think people always get this thing like, oh, it's PG-13. It's just they're taking out the blood and gore. No, could be language, could be nudity, could be a lot of things that make it a PG-13 horror film versus R-rated. But I do admit I always go in with a certain level of skepticism because they had to make a PG-13 for a reason, whatever that reason may be. And after seeing Imaginary and kind of judging that film and saying that was really a kid's horror film that was just being masqueraded as like this scary Blumhouse horror
Right.
film, it really wasn't. I don't know that I'd go as quite as far as to say this is just a YA horror film. I mean, it kind of is, but it's also a movie that to me feels hamstrung a little bit by being PG-13 because I feel like this is a movie that could push the envelope a little further with the creatures, with the premise, which is, you know, kind of dark and foreboding. And it almost feels like they wanted to make it for a YA audience. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, right? I'm not judging them. I'm just saying that the premise of this movie works in such a way that I was like, yeah, again, this has nothing to do with blood and guts. I'm just saying push it to a little bit further extreme in terms of the terror. I think you could have done that a little bit more with this film, and it would have been, it could have been a slightly better horror film. When I walked out of this one, I was thinking, yeah, there's horror elements. There's definitely horror elements. Like, this is being billed as a horror film, and I get it because it's M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. Of course they're going to bill it as a horror film. That's what M. Night Shyamalan's stock and trade is. I get it. But this is more like fantasy, as you said, kind of YA feeling. There's horror tinged in there. There's sci-fi tinged in there. This is not a straight horror film.
There's specific scenes that I could probably point to that we'll talk about in spoilers where I was just like, if more of the movie was this, and those scenes don't have blood in them. Those scenes don't have gory, scary faces in them. They're just tension filled. They're like really gripping tension filled moments. I go, that it could be this movie the whole time. Like if you could do this movie, like still trying to live within its parameters, it would have been more, to me, more effective. But also what this movie is, and we can't get into too much of it pre-spoilers anyway, is this is essentially a world building movie. This movie is about explaining the entire world that I think they're trying to set up as like a franchise. I don't know. I don't quote me on that, but by the end of this, I don't know how you felt, but how I felt was I was like, oh, they're setting this up to be a long-term story. They're setting this up to be like Hunger Games or what was that other one with the Maze Runner? Like they're trying to set up like a long-term story with these characters. And I was like, okay, cool, but like, you know, it's just I don't like sitting there watching people explain everything, and that sucks out all the dread. It sucks out all the dread when like there's this really tense moment that's happening, and then there's a quick moment of release, and in the moment of release, what we get is an explanation of why everything just happened. And you're like, oh, fuck. I really didn't need that explanation. Like you had me. You know, I guess this is where I get on my like pretentious or you know like I've watched so many damn movies at this point. It's like you don't need to explain as much to me as you think you do. And I hold that true for even more casual audiences. It's like audiences are more sophisticated than you think. We take information in at a higher rate than we ever have. You can say less. And this movie is like, no, we're not saying less, we're saying it all. Because they really want to get the attention of younger audiences. And I guess that's what they feel they need to do. That's kind of where I'm out of my element. I think maybe the both of us are because we're in our 40s. But it's like if you're trying to grab teenagers, do you want to talk them to death? Maybe you do. I don't actually know. I don't have teenagers. I don't speak to teenagers on any sort of normal basis. And they probably don't want to speak to me anyway. So it's like, I don't know if that's what they want. And I don't know, you know, as of this recording, if that's going to translate into box office success, but maybe it does. I don't know.
So, Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a good answer for that because it would be pretty creepy if we're like, yeah, we hang out with teens all the time and they tell us all kinds of stuff. No, that's not what's going on
All the
here.
teenagers
Uh,
that I message on social media, it's like, oh no, don't say that.
oh,
Don't say that.
this podcast just took a hard right turn. Yeah, listen. I don't know. I mean, I wish I could tell you if that's exactly what a lot of teens are looking for. Even again, when I say teens, I'm talking like even in your 20s, because that's really the audience.
Yeah.
They're leaning towards. But here's what I'll say. Here's where I fall into, and again, the writer of this, the screenwriter of this movie is Ishana Shyamalan. She adapted it individually from the book by A.M. Shine. Now, how much maybe her dad helped her, mold the script, things like that.
Maybe give her notes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. But she is listed as the sole screenwriter. And from my understanding, and to be clear, I have not read the book, so I can't tell you with 100% accuracy this is dead on. But from everything I can read and surmise from online, this is a pretty close interpretation of the book. There are a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of really tropey horror movie moments in this film, like horror movie story elements in this film. Our lead character, Mina. What I'm about to tell you is the slightest of spoilers, but it's really not a spoiler. This is just setting up the story. Our lead character, Mina, is kind of a disenfranchised, disinterested 20-something girl who works in a pet store in Galway, Ireland, which is where the author A.M. Shine is actually from. And she's just dealt with a lifetime of trauma because she lost her mother. There's more to that story that we could talk about in spoilers, but she's dealing with the trauma of the loss of a parent. Not that unusual, but as soon as that was presented as her the source of her trauma,
yeah,
was that. And then when they actually explain what happened, which is a spoiler and I won't tell you what actually happened, but when they get into like why she's so traumatized, but let's just say the trauma of losing a parent. Now, let me be clear about this. I am not belittling the loss of a parent. Both of my parents are gone. So I understand where people are coming from when they say like, you don't understand. I do understand, but I'm not trying to make it personal. And everyone has their own personal experience of dealing with the loss of a parent. But in a film like this, it felt very tropey. It felt very like we got to give her trauma, that she's got to have this kind of disaffected, almost like distant personality. She's never gotten past that, and it's really haunted everything for the rest of her life. The death of a parent, while I do agree that is a very powerful moment for a person, I understand it's very profound. I get it. But that's not the point of the story. That's not the point of this story. And so it almost feels like you're injecting that just so you say, oh yeah, she's disaffected and distant and kind of disillusioned with the world because she lost her mom. The problem is that really plays no larger part in the story. It's just there. It's just there for her to be a disaffected 20-something. And that's a problem. Now, if this whole story is built around her parents' death, and that's the central idea of the story, then I get it. But when it's just that, it's just like any other tropey. It's like, it sounds very comic booky, like origin story. Like, like my parents died and I got the powers of a spider or whatever. It just sounds very basic and like no creativity injected there, because in this particular movie, really, it means nothing. It could have been anything. It could have been any level of trauma that occurred to her to make her a disaffected, disassociated kind of 20-something. But the death of a parent, they inject it, and they do play it several times throughout the movie, but it really means nothing. It doesn't really play a part in the larger storytelling element of this film.
Yeah, and I can't attest to A.M. Shine's book, but like maybe in the book it goes into deeper reasons why, when you're adapting a novel, you have to pick and choose. You can't adapt the whole damn novel for your movie-going audience. You're closer, maybe you can do that when you're doing a TV show, but when you're in a movie, you need to pick the big chunks that'll actually move the story forward. So maybe there is a deeper understanding of that in the novel, but you're right, in the movie, it feels like an old trope now. And it's a weird trope to use. I forget the actress, and maybe you read this article recently. There was an actress who was like, for some reason, every woman's backstory had to do with sexual assault. She goes, why? Like, women, not all women need to be sexually assaulted to be in a part of a movie. They can have other motivations. And in horror, I think you're right. This has become a trope where it's like, I've lost a parent and now I have to like find the strength to find my way back. It's a very common story. It makes a lot of sense because a lot of people who end up successfully writing a screenplay that gets adapted into a horror film or whatever, they're probably of a certain age. They've probably lost a parent or lost someone super close to them at some point in their life because it takes a long time to actually become a successful screenwriter or filmmaker. So those stories get told a lot. They get told over and over and over again. Can you tell them in a more interesting and dynamic way every time out? That's the challenge because there's so many of them out there. But it was weird where I was like, by the end, I was like, so what does this really have to do with her losing her mom? Like, kind of none of it. It was just one part of a giant block of like world building because most of the other world building exists in our spoiler section, so we won't get into it here. What we could get into right here, Damon, is who adapted this. Because I just said, for most people, takes a long time to get to where they're going. Ishana, by the way, the movie looks great. You know, she looks like she's a competent director, but let's not pretend like she isn't what we call these days, and in some circles it's kind of a naughty word, is a nepo baby. She's the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan, who I, by the way, am with you. I love a lot of his films, and I think he's actually a tremendously great director. He has hits and he has misses, but he's really good at what he does. Like he just is. I guarantee you. Like give him a camera and a couple $100 and try to direct alongside him and see what happens. He's probably going to direct circles around you. Like he's a really talented person. Damon, I want to say this as somebody who has spent pretty much my entire adult life trying to be in the film business and finding, I would say, very mediocre success. But I do collect my paychecks turning cameras on and talking to people and directing stuff. So believe me, I'm nowhere near Ishana's level, but I've been trying this. Some people really hate the idea that children of already established parents are just taking over Hollywood. I got news for you, Damon. It's always been that way. You know who Angelica Houston is? Famous actor, Morticia Adams. Her brother, Sam Houston. You know who he is?
Danny Houston. That's her brother.
Excuse me, Danny Houston. Their dad is John Houston, who was a powerhouse director in his day. One of the biggest, one of the baddest. And you and I just grew up knowing Angelica and Danny Houston and go, oh, they're great. You know, you don't think twice. You don't say boo. It's always been that way. It's always been going on. And if I was the son of a director, I sure as shit would be trying out my hand at directing because it's fucking fun. I love being on set. Imagine if you're a kid, you're 10 years old, and your dad is M. Night Shyamalan, and you're on like the set of like, I don't know, Unbreakable or something, and you're just like, this is awesome. I want to do this. Why wouldn't you? So I don't take points away from Ishana for pursuing this. And by the way, she went to Tisch, which I'm sure somebody was like, oh, you're Ishana Night Shyamalan. Any relation? Okay, you're in. Like, I'm sure that happened. So what? Okay, I know Destin Daniel Cretton. He went to...
And she's only 24, 25. Like, that's typically the age you're getting, like, right around the time you're getting out of college. Maybe a couple years younger, but, like, 24, 20. She's directing her first feature film at 24, 25. That's a rare thing. It is a rare thing.
It's like rarefied air for, like, some of the greatest ever have directed at a very young age. Like it's usually left for that. And it's also left for people who are the sons and daughters of established people. That shit happens. Is it fair? I don't know if it's fair, Damon. Like because I know that I would take the advantage if I had it, because it's a hard business anyway. It's a hard business to get into. And it is a pretty closed circle. But if I had the advantage, I'm not ashamed to say I would take the advantage if I had it. But I'm not gonna dock her points and show up to her movie and go, well, I'm gonna hate this right now because it's M. Night Shyamalan. Some people are gonna hate it because they hate M. Night Shyamalan, and it's like, hold on, that's not fair either because she's not him. But like, yeah, she's a nepo baby, Damon, but she turned in a passable movie. I mean, I've seen worse.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let me tackle a couple of things with this whole nepo baby thing. First off, tell me an industry, a job market where kids don't follow their parents into a family business a lot of times. I'm not saying everybody does it because there's
Right.
a lot, there's hundreds of thousands of actors out there. Not all of their children follow them into the family business.
Right.
But if your dad is a musician, you probably have a little bit better of a chance of being a musician just because that's what you grow up around. If your dad is a lawyer, there's probably a better chance that you're going to end up following in your father's footsteps and becoming a lawyer, or your mother's footsteps. Your mother is a successful business owner and she owns, companies. There's a probably better than average chance one of her, let's say 3 kids, is going to follow her and work in the family business. They're going to work for those companies. The difference in Hollywood is it's just in your face. That's the only difference here. This happens everywhere.
Yeah,
Look at any company out there where there is an implanted CEO who started. I'm talking about like CEOs who built in CEO. I'm talking about people who founded a company, whatever company you're talking about out there. And if they have children, multiple children, chances are at least one of them is somewhere in that business working with them, whether it's insurance, law, car manufacturing, whatever it is. There's a better than average chance if you are a very successful businessman, woman, child, whatever, you're a very business person, one of your children is probably going to follow you into that business. Again, it's not, there's no stereotype or say everyone does it, but I would say the average is at least 25% of like children follow their parents into whatever their parents are doing, or they get that entryway into what their parents are doing. This isn't uncommon. So you can't really get that upset that Ishana Night Shyamalan is doing what her father does, because this is what he does. He's a writer. I think what is actually more interesting is he has a film. M. Night Shyamalan's next movie comes out in August called Trap, which there's trailers out there for it. I'm actually really intrigued by this movie. But we see the whole premise is Josh Hartnett takes his daughter to like a Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift type show, and it's a character called Lady Raven. Lady Raven is played by M. Night Shyamalan's older daughter, who is a musician. Ishana Night Shyamalan got her start directing her sister's music videos.
Yeah.
I mean, so her sister's in show business, but she's a musician. But she's also getting into a movie directed by her father, which is inevitably going to promote her music. This is the family business. This is what they do. I mean, now, here's where I break apart from like the whole, like where a lot of the quote unquote nepo babies get upset about this, and the kids of celebrities get upset when you bring this up. Like, you're acting like I didn't work hard and I didn't earn this, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Recently, Maya Hawke, who is the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. Talk about the frickin' gene pool to create that daughter.
The lottery.
It was brought up to her that she was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And if you look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when it came out, the Quentin Tarantino movie, there's like 6 actors in that movie who Tarantino cast who have now become massive A-list celebrities. But at the time he cast them, they were nobodies. Sydney Sweeney, who was that when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was filming, it was like a month after Euphoria had just come out. No one really knew what it was. So she got cast long before people knew Euphoria was going to be a hit. So she's kind of like the one anomaly because she's not a nepo baby. But Maya Hawke got in the movie. It's also got Austin Butler in the movie. Now, he's not a nepo baby either, but Austin Butler's in the movie. Like, it was a really, like, when you look at who's in there, why am I not thinking of her name? Margaret Qualley's in the movie. Now, she is a nepo baby. Her mother's Andy McDowell.
Yep.
but all these like younger actors were in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and now they're like all pretty much A-list level actors, but they were all kind of like, wow, Tarantino really knocked it out of the park with this. Part of it, yes, Austin Butler and Sydney Sweeney. Part of it, no, Maya Hawke, Harley Quinn Smith, Kevin Smith's daughter, and all these, they're all Nepo babies. But what Maya Hawke said is that, they brought it up to her, and she said in a quote recently when she did it, she said, I've been wildly made fun of for this clip when I said on the red carpet that I auditioned. I never meant to imply that I didn't get the part for nepotism reasons. I think I totally did. And then she talks about like she's like, and when they talk about like deserves and things like that, she said, she goes on to say it's like deserves is a complicated word. There are so many people who deserve to have this kind of life who don't. But I think I'm comfortable with not deserving it and doing it anyway. And I know that my not doing it wouldn't help anyone. I saw two paths when I was first starting, and one of them was change your name, get a nose job, and go to open casting roles. So here's where I break apart with the whole Nepo baby thing. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like it or not, it's going to happen. I just wish more children of celebrities were Maya Hawke, where she's like, I know I am. I'm not denying that I probably got this role because I am Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter. But guess what? Maya Hawke is wildly talented. I love a lot of the things she's in. She was fantastic in Stranger Things. She's fantastic in a lot of things. She's a musician too. She's put out an album recently. Ultimately, while you can skate by at the beginning on nepotism, that's true, and you might get more chances than the average person. You might get a role that you don't deserve. But ultimately, the industry will weed you out. If you're not good at your job, because we just talked about this earlier, Martin Scorsese, maybe the greatest living filmmaker today, one of the most revered filmmakers of today, spent 12 years in filmmaker jail, where people didn't care about his stuff. He wasn't winning Oscars. No one really paid attention to Martin Scorsese. Now it sounds, everyone's like, Martin Scorsese had, yes, Martin Scorsese had a period in his career where no one really cared what Martin Scorsese was making. Then he came out with Goodfellas, and it was one of the greatest movies of all time, and the Oscars fucked up by not giving him Best Picture. So my point is, if you are a Nepo baby, just embrace it. Just embrace it. Don't fight it. Stop the bullshit. Be Maya Hawke. She's like, you know what? Yeah, I am. I accepted it. Okay. I appreciate that. That's like, I used a baseball analogy earlier for a horror film podcast. I'm about to use another baseball analogy, but it's a real one. When you're a Nepo baby or you get into the job by nepotism, pretending that you hit a home run when you were born on third base are not the same thing. Just admit you were born on third base. I have no problem with you walking home. I have no problem with you walking home, but don't pretend like you hit a home run. Don't pretend like you just hit a home run. You were born on third base. There's a huge difference. Now, that's what Maya Hawke did. Maya Hawke said, I admit I was born on third base, and I'm just accepting it and embracing it. Kudos to you, Maya. I got no problem with you doing what you're doing. It's the other side of it, which is, oh, no, I didn't get this job because, my name's Mason Gooding. I didn't get this job because my dad's Cuba Gooding, or all these interviews I see where they shy away from it. Just admit you got in, you got a cast, you got an agent, you got in opportunities to do in casting, you got a lot of opportunities just based upon your last name or who your parents were. I don't have a problem with that. Just embrace it. And part two of that, as I said earlier, the industry will weed you out. Did you know that Sylvester Stallone has a brother named Frank Stallone?
It didn't work out for Frank.
They tried real hard with Frank Stallone for a lot of years. It never panned out. Now you never hear Frank Stallone anymore. That's the point. Like, the industry will weed out non-talented people. I don't think anyone would say Maya Hawke's not talented. She's incredibly talented. I love Maya Hawke.
She shows up.
Emma Roberts. She's the daughter of Eric Roberts. She's the niece of Julia Roberts. I like Emma Roberts. So, again, talent shows through. It's just getting in the door that is harder, that a lot of people don't get that opportunity. As long as you admit that somebody opened the door and you walked through it, you were born on third base and you walked home, and you don't act like you hit a home run, I got no problem with the whole nepotism thing.
There's a couple of actors I want to put on blast, but I'm not going to do it here. You can DM us at Rewind the Living Dead and find out those names, because I'm just not going to do it publicly. There's no point. And it might come to bite me in the ass one day when I'm sitting across the table from them and they go, remember when you said that, like, you know, I wasn't, I was pretending I wasn't a Nepo baby and you said I totally was. Like they're out there. There's a couple of actors out there that are just like, nah, no, that didn't help at all. It's like, yeah, no, you think it didn't help, but your agent, who you got because your dad is so and so, they definitely went, yeah, it's so and so's son. Just so you know. Like, I know you think you just walked into the room and charmed the shit out of the room because because some kids are sheltered like that and they're just go, oh yeah, no, we didn't even mention who your dad is. It's yes, they did. They 100% did. They do it all the time. They do it casually to me. Like I'm nobody and I can do nothing for no one. And they'll still go, oh, it's so and so's son or so and so's daughter. I'm like, okay, great. Like they do it all the time. It's fine. But at the end of the day, right? Like, you know, the jury is kind of out on Ishana Shyamalan's career. She still put forth something where I was like, well, that was certainly like a competent movie. Like I didn't walk away from this going, I can't believe they let her direct that. I can't believe she fumbled that ball. Like, you know, like it looks great. It's directed well. The story, okay, look at writing. I would say the Shyamalan family's writing is always up for debate. That you know, they like to tell their stories the way they tell their stories. It's in the blood. I mean, clearly it's in the blood. And you know, the other daughter's a songwriter too. They write. They're writers. Some people are going to love that writing style. You know, I have my personal tastes and I'm like, oh yeah, that writing style is not for me. So that may be the longer term test. But in terms of like, I'll put it to you this way. If I was like assembling a team of directors to direct a Game of Thrones style TV show, I'd certainly take a look at Shauna's, like, to put her on the roster. I was like, yeah, that looked like a good, solid movie. The camera was doing the right thing at the right times. The actors didn't seem like they were, you know, we had recently, Damon, a horror movie on here from a Nepo baby. And we were like, wow, this is not directed well. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Hold on, what are you talking about? What am I forgetting here?
I'm talking about a movie that was a funny, fun movie from earlier in the year. And it just was like, the problem with the movie was how badly directed it was. And the director is indeed the offshoot of a famous actor. And it was just like, yeah, that's actually the problem with the movie, is how badly directed it was. Ishana, that's not the issue here. I was like, ooh, this is slickly directed. Did she sit on set on her dad's own TV show and direct episodes of, and did she learn directing from her dad? Yes, she did. He's also a really great director. So it rubbed off on her. Thank goodness. So that part, I just want to like clear the air on that stuff, because I think some people will sit down and go, M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, whatever. You still got to do the work. You still got to answer the call. She did. Did I love this movie? I didn't love this movie. But I didn't love this movie because I don't think this is my type of movie. But I think she did a great job.
So real quick before we move on, two things. One, I will say that I was a little more confident, maybe a little bit more going into the movie, a little more confident about what I was about to see from Ishana Night Shyamalan, because I watched Servant on Apple TV. I watched that for all 4 seasons, I believe it was. Really, really enjoyed that show, and she ended up directing a lot of episodes in the last 2 seasons. His daughter's music is also on the show. Let me just throw that out there to kind of continue the whole Nepo Baby conversation. But I was confident she knew what she was doing, because she wrote and directed on that show, and that show was really, really well done. And so, yeah, I was totally fine with it. By the way, you said not calling any names. I don't know why I mentioned Mason Gooding earlier. I just mentioned him because he's in Scream. By the way, I'm not calling him out. I just used him as an example because he was one where, like, when I first heard of him, I heard Mason Gooding, didn't even think of it, and then someone's like, that's Cuba Gooding's son. It's like, oh, Jesus, I didn't think, it's Gooding. I should have thought of it, but, like, at the time, it just didn't occur to me, and then I was like, oh, yeah, that's Cuba Gooding's son. By the way, I'm not calling him out. I want to be clear about that. I'm just using him as an example of somebody that's like a guy in a movie who has that name. He didn't get there by accident. He didn't just, he didn't just fall into a casting room and they're like, oh, your last name's what, Gooding? Oh, who's that? That's all. I'm just using him as an example, just like I use Maya Hawke as an example.
Right.
So I was a little more confident in the Ishana Night Shyamalan, talent pool, because I had seen her direct and write on Servant, which I really enjoyed. The flip side of that And this is where I come. I'm going to tell you a little story from my day job, which I'm sure everyone's going to be super enthralled by that. My day job, I work in mixed martial arts. That's my regular day job. I'm a journalist in mixed martial arts. Don't talk about it on this show because I like to keep my world separate. And, this is almost like a vacation for me to talk about horror films because this is what I love to do. And I love MMA too, don't get me wrong. I'm saying that is my actual job. In MMA, there's a very famous family. The first family of mixed martial arts, they're called the Gracies. Royce Gracie was the first Ultimate Fighting champion. Now, people who don't watch the UFC, that's totally fine. Just follow along with me for a second. He was the first ever Ultimate Fighting champion. He was an incredible, amazing athlete. He comes from a lineage of incredible, amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stylists, the Gracie family. Now, Royce Gracie winning and doing what he did, and then that set off almost like a string of firecrackers where everyone started paying attention to the Gracie family because they were all very much from that lineage of being special martial artists. The problem is, years later, and even to this day, we're talking the original UFC was in 1994. We're 30 years later. 1993, 31 years later.
Oh, God.
31 years later, anytime somebody comes into our sport with the last name Gracie, they immediately have a much brighter spotlight on them. They are not allowed to develop. They are not allowed to exist without having that spotlight on them. And I will tell you, and I don't mean to offend anyone out there who listens to this show and knows me from MMA and they decide to listen to my horror movie podcast. I'm not telling you anything you probably don't already know. There has never been another successful Gracie in the sport. Been a couple who have come close, a couple who won some big fights, but no one has ever even come remotely close to being the same level of what Royce Gracie was early on. And that last name has almost become a deterrent because you can't find success without, you're a Gracie. So we expect greatness, and when you don't show up and you don't do what your grandfather, your uncle, whoever did, then you're not very good. You don't get that same level of growth and evolution that a typical up-and-coming fighter would get because you have that last name Gracie. It's almost like the opposite of the film industry. Where that relates back to Ishana Night Shyamalan. While we agree, and I think she would agree, I hope she agreed, that she got into the business because her dad is M. Night Shyamalan, one of the most famous horror thriller filmmakers of the past 25, 30 years. I would really hope she wouldn't deny that. But even then, here's where the problem comes in. Here's where her last name becomes a problem. I sat down in this movie, and I started watching it. 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in, when they first got into the bunker, when we find out that there's these creatures, these people exist in this bunker, my mind, having never read the book, having no idea what the total plot of this movie was besides the early premise, my mind immediately went to, where's the twist? What's the twist going to be? Because what do we know about M. Night Shyamalan? And that has been to his detriment since The Sixth Sense. Every single movie that M. Night Shyamalan comes out with, we all expect a twist. Now, to be fair, he played into that trope the early part of his career. After Sixth Sense, he came out with Unbreakable. Now, Unbreakable's twist was amazing. That, to me, is the greatest comic book origin story film of all time that's not actually a comic book. I like a lot of his other films. I really like The Village. I really like Signs is one of my favorite alien invasion thrillers of all.
I like Lady in the Water.
I like Lady in the Water too. That's another one. That's a very polarizing opinion.
I know.
To say you like Lady in the Water.
That movie's totally fine.
But what do every one of those films have? Some twist. Some twist at the end. That's what you've come to expect. And then now, for better or worse, that's what you've come. Now, that to me is problematic because if M. Night Shyamalan decides to just make a political thriller or whatever, or a comedy, you're going to be looking for it because that's become his stock and trade. Now, again, better or worse, because her name is Ishana Night Shyamalan, and I know this is a horror film, from moment one, I sat down, and I'm not saying this is right, but I immediately was like, well, where's the twist? And I looked for it. And guess what? I found it. Not going to spoil what it is. I figured it out 20 minutes into the movie. Didn't ruin it for me. There's a lot of problems in this movie that had nothing to do with that twist. But that's where the last name came back to bite her, because I came into this movie thinking she's M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. She's directing a thriller with kind of like this mystery about these creatures. There's going to be a twist in here. There is a twist. I wasn't wrong. And I was almost like, it's like to her detriment that she had that last name, because I went in thinking there's going to be a twist. There was a twist. And it didn't ruin the movie for me. I'll be clear about it. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but I was looking for it. Just like I kind of look for it every M. Night Shyamalan movie, because he set such a standard for himself to every time you watch an M. Night Shyamalan movie, you know there's going to be a twist. You know it. And so it's kind of, I think that kind of served to her detriment, because I guarantee you, and you know I'm right, Patrick, I guarantee you I'm not alone in sitting down in this theater and thinking there's going to be a twist, because it's a Shyamalan movie.
I think some people definitely were thinking like that. I actually wasn't. I went in, even though I knew it was Ishana. I wasn't thinking about a twist at all. But Damon, I feel like it's a perfect segue to now expound on this topic in spoilers. Don't you agree?
Yeah, let's get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Watchers, it's in theaters right now. Go check it out. It's out. We always talk about we love the theater experience, so go check it out. But right now we are getting into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Watchers, either A, understand we're going to talk spoilers, but B, just don't let it get ruined for you if you haven't seen it. So do you want to start? Do you want to talk about the twist? Do you want to start there?
Yes. Yeah, because I think the twist is what the story it kind of is, right? So you see in the trailer right away, they say, look, there are these things out there. They're the Watchers. Our job is we have to let them watch us at night, and we are not allowed to venture out past that. Damon, I want to know, because I have a very different experience from you, because I wasn't searching for a twist. I came in not having that weight on the shoulders, but I get what you're saying. So tell me, with regards to the story, why you were like, bang, there's a twist coming, and there it is.
So right away when we meet Mina and she gets lost. Okay, first off, again, there's so many plot things I want to talk about that I couldn't talk about without spoilers, but I'm gonna get into right now. First off, she's driving. She works at a pet store, and her job is to drive a special parrot, from her pet store up to where an owner of another, like a
zoo.
Customer, a zoo, yeah, that's what it is, a zoo.
Yeah,
They're going to take possession. They're going to take possession of this parrot. She has to drive there. So she's using GPS, and she's going from Galway, Ireland, to this other town in Ireland. Now, my family's from Ireland. I'm not from Ireland. Just like anything else, I know there are weird, twisty, turny, windy roads that take you places. I'm not denying that. But her path to get to this town took her to the windiest, like small little one-horse roads, and then somehow, in the middle of her journey, she just starts driving through the fucking woods. Did we ever know why? She just started driving through the woods, and then her car breaks down and she's lost in the woods. It was the weirdest reason I could possibly imagine. And I understand like the tropey thing about the trauma of her mom dying. Like, I understand it would have been even tropier for her to be like, let's go camping, and they get lost in the woods. I understand that would have been, but at least that would have made some semblance of like sense. She was driving with GPS, and somehow she just veers off the road and ends up in this wooded ass area. Like, her car's literally surrounded by trees. She's not even on the road anymore. And they never explain how she got there. She just ends up there.
But Damon, tell us how the story gets.
So once she gets inexplicably lost in the woods, she starts trying to look for help, and she suddenly can't find her way back to her car, and then she sees a woman outside in the woods, and this woman's basically like, you need to run, or I can't remember the exact terminology she uses, but she runs back to this shelter. And it's like a big door, big steel door, and it's like almost like a big concrete shelter with this giant window in the front of it. And she's like, you need to hurry because the sun's going down. And she's like, you have 3 seconds, 2, 1. And Mina runs in, they close and lock the door. Oh my God, what happened? She says, the Watchers come out at night and they watch us. So we have to stand in front of this window. It's a mirror on our side, but it's a window on their side. And they watch us for hours upon hours. And then when it's over and it's daylight, we can go outside, we can go foraging for food, we can hang out, we can do whatever the fuck we want. We can watch really bad British reality love shows, which is like the most random thing they had in this movie. Do anything you want, But then at sundown, you have to rush back into this bunker and stand there in front of them, and they like us to do things. Now, this is where I was like, oh, this is about to get really pervy because they're going to do things. She's like, well, one of them's got to dance, and then some of them listen to music. It's just a really odd, but they want to watch you. Like they're voyeurs of the non-pervy variety. But there's one woman in this thing named Madeline who's been there longer than anybody else. There's a woman named, was it
Kira?
Kira, played by Georgina Campbell. She's been there. She says she's been there for a couple months, right? I think she said like a couple months. Daniel's been there for like 8 months. He says 5 to 8 months, I think is what he said.
Something like
months,
that, yeah.
But then Madeline never really explains how long she's been there, but she's been there the longest. And she knows all the rules, which you heard in our trailer we play, which is, get back by sundown, look right in the mirror, don't turn your back to them. All these little rules and regulations. She's the one keeping everybody in line to make sure they don't break these rules. And the second that happened, I was like, oh yeah, she's one of the watchers. Okay, cool. She's one of the watchers. And sure enough, they literally beat you over the head to tell you that she's one of the watchers when they finally discover, which by the way, this goes back to the whole, this is why you say it's like a YA thing. They live in this, it's a one-room bunker. They have a bucket to poop and pee in. They have a TV. They have a couch, and they have like a table. That's it. It's very one room and a bed, I think. That's it. Literally nothing in there but just a very, 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 very basic setup. But somehow during the time that once Mina gets in there, they discover that there's a rug on the floor that opens up and there's a hatch. It's like Lost. They're like, ooh, there's a hatch. In 8 months, you never fucking thought to look under the fucking rug to see what's under there? You never moved the rug once?
By the way, they conveniently found the hatch when they fucked around with these watchers, and the watchers started to break through, and they were going to break through and get them. And right when they were about to break through and get them, they found the hatch, very conveniently.
Yeah, so they get down in the hatch and they find out that this was actually set up as a scientific experiment. A scientist heard about or discovered there were these creatures called the Watchers, which are actually fairies. There's your fantasy thoughts. There were fairies back in the day, but then humanity turned on them and trapped them in these woods, and now they can't escape and they can't leave during the daylight because they can't survive in daylight. They're fairies, but they're also vampires apparently. So it's a little, True Bloodish, where they're they're fairies, but they're also vampires.
Yeah.
And so when they get down in this bunker, they discover there was a scientist who was studying these creatures, and he was trying to understand them. And you come to learn, I mean, it's just like they just beat you over the head with it.
It's a lot of information.
It's just literally for 10 minutes. It's Mina watching the scientist do video journals, and he just explains everything.
It's
everything.
About every 10 minutes is some sort of info dump. And I say 10 minutes, I might be generous. It might be every 5 minutes. There's just there'll be something, there'll be a sequence, and then it's info dump, because there's this professor that they all sort of know about for some reason. And, he found out that there was fairies and they were locked away in this forest. And you're like, okay, well, there's a lot of things going on. What's happening here? And then there was a time before all this where Mina is traipsing through the woods with Danny, and they find one of the holes which they're not supposed to go near, and they go down and they discover in the hole there's a bunch of stuff in that hole. It's like, well, why is that stuff in the hole? Why is this here? Why is that here? What does the parrot have to do with anything? What does Mina's recording of her sister have to do with anything? And why does she constantly repeat it? What does that have to do with anything? Why? I have a lot of question marks in my notes. A lot. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? A lot of those question marks don't really get answered. A lot of those question marks just kind of are left unanswered because they just kind of got you to the next bit of world building reveal, because it was just building to the idea that what these things want, what these fairies want, is they want to turn into us. They have the ability to shapeshift like us. That was the whole reason, apparently, that humans turned on them, because they didn't like that they could resurrect, which is another element. Jesus Christ, there's another element where they can resurrect things. They could resurrect, and they could turn and look like you. So you go, okay, there's a lot of things going on here. So what does it all of it mean? Well, these watchers, these fairies, they want out of the woods, and what they're going to do is they're going to look like humans, and they're going to get back into the real world. How they're going to do it? There's yet another piece of lore. They're going to do it because there is one watcher out there somewhere that is a halfling. This reveal, the reveal of the halfling, in any traditional movie, I would say you'd get that reveal right around the midpoint of the movie. It'd be like, folks, here's the thing. These fairies, they're going to get out of here. And because there's a halfling one, there's one that can walk during the day. And if that one can walk during the day, we're all fucked. Because they're going to get out and then they're going to find a way to let all the other fairies out, and then our world's going to be overrun with fairies. I'm not kidding, folks. That's what this is all about. That's usually done right in the middle of a movie. Damon, this was done like an hour and 30 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
90 minutes into the movie, almost a full movie has happened before the halfling is revealed, or the existence of one is revealed. And so now I'm going, okay, this movie's almost over, and I just got a whole big new thing revealed to me. And that halfling is indeed, is it Melinda? Is that her name?
Madeline.
Madeline, who's played by Owen Ferrer. I don't know how to say her name correctly. Who played Sally Hardesty in your favorite Texas Chainsaw 2022. She turns out to be the Daywalker. That's why she had all this knowledge, and this professor had. It's so much gymnastics to do here. The professor had her modeled after his late wife, which is also another thing that's going on. Like there's so much, Damon. So much was happening in this movie, and it was fully exhausted.
The mythology in this movie is so utterly clunky. Like they do gymnastics jumping around from one thing to the other to make it make sense. Like it's okay, it's creatures in the woods, then they are shape-shifting creatures. So they're watching us to mimic humans. Okay? So you need how long do you need to figure this out? Because apparently these people have been there for, months upon months at this point, and they figured out they can't leave. So how the fuck long does it take to mimic these? Like you need this long to mimic us? And so they're shapeshifters. Then we find out they're fairies. Then we find out that humans turned on the fairies. Then we find out that fairies and humans used to fuck and have kids. Then you find out that one survived and one's a halfling and it can survive during the day. Then you find out that it's a daywalker. It's Blade. It can walk around in the day. Why are they afraid of, by the way, of all the clunky mythology out there, did they ever explain why these things can only survive at night? No, they did not. They never said why. They just said that they used to have wings and fly around and shit, and now they've been captured underground, and when they escaped, they couldn't see the daylight. Why exactly? Who the fuck knows? Because it just made the mythology. That made the mythology where you couldn't leave during the daytime. It is the clunkiest, like, dancing around to make it try to make sense mythology ever. It bugged me to no end because it seemed like everything that happened, they made it work to the disadvantage of our lead characters. Like, they're in this bunker. We learned pretty early on that these things can get inside. So what the fuck is the point of locking the door? Because they can get in if they want to get in. So I don't understand that. They've been watching them for months already. They can only survive at night. Like, all these different little things.
Yeah, also, you can't, the reason they finally broke in is because you turned your back on them. But why is that a problem?
Yeah, why did that never matter? Like they said, they never explained that either. They said, don't turn your back on them. Why?
And why was it a problem that you'd be out at night with them? Why would they devour you at night? I guess they'd devour you at night to turn into you, but even that I don't think is correct. They're so...
You couldn't escape. Like the whole point was you couldn't escape. And so what is the difference? Like you couldn't go out at night.
Yeah, if I can't escape these woods, although there is a way to escape, that's a whole other element, which by the way is Mina maps the woods during the day because there are these outer reaches where they're called points of no return. And she figures out, oh, okay, I've mapped all the points of no return. And then with the help of all of the information that the professor locked in his dungeon that she found, like, oh, we can go out through this one. That's our point of no return. That's how we can actually get out of these woods.
But
It's just,
when Mina goes into the woods and she sees her car and then she walks like 20 feet, she turns around, her car is gone. They make it seem like these woods are magical, so you can't escape the woods. So,
right.
in the point of no return are basically markers where it says this is a point of no return where you have this much time to get back to the bunker before nightfall drops. Which again, if the whole point of the fairies, of the watchers, is to mimic us, they want to learn us so they can mimic us, which again, okay, whatever. Why would they want to kill you? If you can't escape anyways, like you can't get out of the woods. That's the mythology just goes all over the place because they make it seem like you're stuck in these woods. There's no way out of these woods. That's
And
what
we
they
know, and we know somebody who went and got caught in those woods, which was it was Kira's husband
husband.
John,
Yeah.
and they killed him. But I'm like, but why? I guess because they're mad at humans for locking them away in this woods, which they have this piece of woods. I don't know, Damon. It's a lot of shit. That's the point. It's a lot. It's so much information. I don't know what to do with it all.
Well, and again, it's jumping around so much that it just doesn't make any sense because, as I said,
what?
like every moment they create a problem that they then have to create a solution to. That's not storytelling. That's not good storytelling. I know this because I'm a professional storyteller. You do not create your own problems to then try to have to figure out a way to solve them. They're trapped in the bunker. The watchers want to watch them. Okay, that's a simple enough premise. Why can't you turn your back on them? Okay, they never explain that. There's no reason for that. Okay, they can see you, but you can't see them. Okay, that's simple enough premise. Why are they watching us? Well, they finally reveal that later, which is they're studying us to become us. Well, if that's the case, then why do they want to kill us? Because wouldn't they want to study us, not kill us? And if this is a magical woods where people who get here never get out, then why do they need to trap us there during the daytime? If they can't get out anyways, then what does it matter? You can just walk around and study them walking. I need to figure out how humans run, how humans scream, how humans whatever the fuck. It's the premise is just mind-boggling stupid because they create problems and they have to be like, okay, you can only go out during the daytime. Why? If the whole purpose of these fairies, of these creatures, is to study us to then become us, why would they kill you?
You know what this movie's really missing is a goal for our main characters. Now, the obvious is like, well, wait a minute. Their goal is to get out of this forest. Okay, I get that because they're trapped in this forest. But that's plot. That is not story. Plot is I'm stuck here. How do I get to there? That's plot. That's just movement. Story is why does Mina need to get out of these woods? Yes, yeah, we all want to live. It's so simple. What aren't you getting? That doesn't make. Yeah, I know. If that made a good movie, all movies would just be like, I just need to escape a place. What you need is like, okay, this is a weird way to do this. You remember Con Air, the great Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage needed to get back to his family. He had something to get back to. We establish Mina as someone who has nothing to get to, nothing to reach out to. They do, I'll give them this. They tie in that her twin sister has been calling her and wanting her to reunite with her and her nieces and just kind of become part of the normal world again. But the problem is that the whole movie, Mina doesn't give a fuck about doing that at all. She doesn't want to get back with them. That's not a goal for her to reach back to.
And not to interrupt you, but just to tell the part like why the mother thing, because that's the thing, the payoff, the story about her mother's death, it means nothing.
Yeah, when she was a little kid, she distracted her mom in the car, and her mom, like I do, by the way, I'm yelling at my kids, like, shut up back there. You turn around, and then her mom veered into the other lane and crashed the car. Her mom died. And so she has blamed herself her entire life for her mom's death. Her sister's still alive. Her sister forgives her. Her sister doesn't really care. Her sister's like, just, if her sister was like, I don't know, like if you're mad about her or not, she's not. She's like, hey, come be part of our family. And she just doesn't want any of that. And the woods don't make her want it more. nothing about the experience made her want to reconnect with her sister more. So thematically, there was no glue there. So yes, there's a plot there, but the story never landed.
Yeah, like she felt guilty about her role in her mother's death. Okay. So what driver was that? What purpose did that serve in Mina escaping the bunker? It didn't serve any purpose whatsoever. None of it did. None of
No.
it. She wasn't racing. She wasn't trying to reconnect with her sister. No, she didn't want to be around her sister. She was ignoring her sister's calls. That whole storyline made no sense. Like, her trauma could have just as easily been she had a flat tire early in the day and she was pissed off about having a flat tire because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like,
So
the whole
yeah,
trauma about her mother didn't matter. And they tried. This is where the mental gymnastics comes into work, where they create a problem, they try to create a solution. Is one of the solutions that you find out about the changeling, or about the halfling, and who's the shapeshifter, is that the scientist was trying to resurrect his dead wife, who looks like Madeline. That's what we find out. The big twist is when they go back to the professor's lab, and they want to destroy all the. His last entry in his video entry is like, "I've been wrong this entire time. This is a bad idea. Whoever finds this, get back to my lab and destroy all my notes. No one should ever come to this place again and try to do what I did." And so once they escape the woods, Mina goes to this guy's lab, which is still in perfect condition years later, but that's neither here nor there. And she finds all this evidence, and then she finds photos, and she realizes that the scientist, his wife, looked like Madeline, and she died of cancer a decade before. And so he was trying to turn one of the halflings, one of the daywalker, into his wife. He wanted her to be the model of his wife so he could have his wife back. And that's what he tried desperately to do. But as he figured out, even though it looked like her, it wasn't her, which, again, this is the whole bouncing around mental gymnastics. Like, she looked like her, but it wasn't her. Okay, whatever. But, like, again, what does any of that have to do with the trauma of losing her mother? None of it does. None of it has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, when you're going to show people the main character, when you're going to make someone the main character, you have to show the audience why we want them to, like, succeed at their goal. What's important about that finish line for them? It's easy enough to just say, well, she wants to get out of the woods, but tell me how often you're going to enjoy that movie. At the end of the day, you won't, unless, I don't know, unless the only other way you could do it is make this a hard R and make it gory as shit and make it crazy. And then it's like, oh, thank God, I'm out of the woods. In a Violent Nature, we just reviewed that. Go check it out. Like, that's different. That's not this. This through every possible little storyline and trope and world building thing and all, and it just got completely exhausting. And what I determined in the end there, because in the end, Madeline, who is the halfling, who looks like the professor's wife, who knew all the rules, who for some reason, got everybody through this ordeal, even though she herself was a halfling, because it was her goal to get, really the story is Madeline's goal. Her goal was to get out of there and get back into the real world and find a way to release all of the fairies. This really was the setup for a bigger set of movies. That's what this was. So this was just world building for like 3, 4, 5 movies down the road. And I go, oh, okay. I don't know if that's really the plan. I have no idea, but it sure felt like that. It sure felt like this was a really long, what was essentially like some supplementary material for a bigger trilogy somewhere else. Like, this is like the graphic. Oh, this is cool. It's a graphic novel about the stuff that happened before this. And then I can pay off the mom. Then I can pay off Kira and John's story. Then I can pay off Danny's story down the line. But I get to see them. I get to see the start here. We're kind of seeing the start of everything here. And especially in the realm of Mina, we're barely scratching the surface of her by the time the movie's over. We're barely starting to understand her character by the end of this movie. And so that leaves you very like, huh, okay. So this was just a real big buildup for something else. It might be like how some people's reactions to Denis Villeneuve's first Dune movie was. Like, oh, this was all just a big setup for other movies. Yeah, it was. It was done really well. And there was a lot of theme put into the characters and all that stuff. And actually, I would argue that Dune doesn't throw a ton of things at you. In the original Dune, Dune Part 2 throws way more at you. Dune Part 1 kind of lets you focus on like two houses, and that's it. Two houses and their goals, and they give you the idea that there's bigger stuff happening that's going to come down the line. Maybe they could have gone that route here. I don't know. What do I know? I don't know what their goal was with this, but if their goal was to exhaust me, they succeeded incredibly.
So there's two, real quick here, I got to point out two things that bug me beyond all the other things that bug me. So we mentioned Mina's motivation. There was none. Like, why was she getting out besides just trying to escape the woods? What was she trying to get back to? She certainly wasn't trying to get back to her old life. She really didn't seem to like her old life.
She's trying to deliver a bird. Is really what she was trying to do.
Yeah, which is a really weird motivation. But she wasn't trying to reunite with her sister. She wasn't like longing for that reunion. She wasn't trying to make things right with her sister because she felt like she actually killed her mother, which she didn't really do. None of that. But here's the problem. None of the characters in that bunker had any motivation. We never figured out why Daniel mattered, the kid, the younger guy. Like, he was just there. Like, he got lost in the woods. Okay, cool. Kira, her husband's already dead. He ventured out. He made the mistake of going out in the woods, and he never came back. So what's her motivation? He's dead. So what's she fighting? Like, none of these characters have anything to fight for. None of these characters have anything to get back to, with the exception that we want to escape this bunker and get out of the woods. That was their only motivation. When you don't inject enough terror into that, because now this is where I talk about it, they just hamstring themselves and they go back to try to create the creative problems. Now they got to try to create a solution. If the whole point of the watchers is to learn about us so they can mimic us, that goes back to my point. Why would they kill you? Because if they can't mimic you if you're fucking dead. And then these characters who want to escape, they have no real reason to escape other than they want to get out of here. So if they want to get out of here, shouldn't that be where the terror begins? Like, shouldn't we see like them running and being like really panicked for their lives? That never really happens until the very end, when they finally do find the route out, where the doctor says there's a boat conveniently located on this direction of the path and you can find it. And then Daniel gets killed. He's the one guy who doesn't get away. Once again, we don't really learn. Why didn't they just capture him and take him back? They just kill him for no reason whatsoever, because they don't need to copy him anymore, I guess. They didn't get enough out of the last 8 months. Whatever. And so then we get like 3 false endings, which bug the living hell out of me. Now, when they get out on the boat, they float into society again, to civilization. Oh, we survived. We made it. We got out. Oh, my God. That's great. Here's Kira. Here's Madeline. Here's Mina. They all made it. Yay. Mina decides to follow through on the professor's instructions. She's going to go to his office and she's going to destroy all his research. Okay? She goes to the office. She plays it off like she's his niece or whatever the hell. She gets in there. She starts looking through everything, and that's where she finds the photos. But we don't see the photos. We just know she found something. And she rushes out of there, and she goes and runs to Kira's house. Kira opens the door. What's going on? What's on? Look at this. The photos. The professor's wife looks like Madeline. He was trying to turn the halfling into his wife. Madeline is the halfling. Oh, there's a big reveal. Madeline's already in the house. Madeline is actually copying Kira, and she tries to kill Kira and Mina.
And Mina, yeah.
Now, here's where I run into a fucking brick wall. If this whole story, the ending, I'm not saying it would have made the whole film better, but if the ending, this is my rewrite of Living Dead, if the ending was just, we got out, we all made it, we're all going to go our separate ways and re-enter our lives, and then they discover that Madeline was actually a halfling and they helped her escape. They've now brought a half fairy out into the world, and this half fairy can mimic anybody. There's an ending after they discover all this and after the weird, fight scene at Kira's house. She gets away anyways, and both characters survive. And they just have a lot of talking in there. A whole lot of talking in there. But in the end,
by the way, in that sequence, they literally beat her by talking to her. And
Yeah,
they
that's it. Yeah,
talk to her, and that makes her grow wings and fly away.
yeah. So the ending is Mina saying that I know that Madeline's still out there, and every now and again I feel like there's somebody watching me, and I feel like it's her just kind of keeping an eye on me as she's like out there in the world. And I know she's out there in the world, and that's where you say like world building to set up a sequel, which again I don't know if they're going to do it or not. I have no idea. That whole sequence at Kira's house felt so utterly unnecessary. It served zero purpose. The big reveal that the halfling escaped and she was the one, and she was always the one, and now she's out there in the world and she can mimic anybody. That in and of itself is kind of terrifying to know there's a changeling out there, there is a shapeshifter out there who can mimic anybody, and we'll never know exactly who she is unless she shifts back into Madeline, who we know is actually dead. There, she could be anybody out there. That's kind of terrifying. But then they bring her back to try to kill them for no real reason. What's she going to do? Go on the news and tell everyone they're going to believe her? There are fairies out in the world? Yeah, that's going to go over real well. She'll be in a padded cell in about 10 minutes if she goes out and screams to the world, the fairies are real. They're trying to mimic us. Oh, shit. It was just that whole scene in the house served no purpose, Patrick.
I really am confused by that scene in the house, because what Mina does is Mina reveals to Madeline that, Madeline, you are the halfling. And Madeline's like, oh, I am? But also I know I am because I just changed into Kira. I was like, what? What? Like, and this is literally how they beat her, right? She's about to kill them. I mean, she's fucking them up bad. And like Mina goes, you're the halfling. He tried to create you and did it. And she's like, she starts like growing wings, and then she just flies away. And I'm like, what? Like, what? She knew she was the halfling. She's here doing it. She's doing halfling things right in front of you. But that's how they beat her, you know, by revealing to her what she already knows she is, because she's literally doing it to them right now. So I was like, what the fuck is that? But I think what they were trying to do here is thematically they were trying to say, we don't beat the fairy. The fairy is one side of a bigger story. We did something bad to the fairies because we were living in harmony with them. Remember, that's part of this third or fourth or fifth or sixth act, whatever it is. I'm losing count. That moment was to say like, hey, we're cool with you, man. Like that was what people did in the past. Me and Kira, we don't live in the past, man. We know you're a halfling and we think it's all good. And so in that moment, I guess what they're trying to do is say there's two sides to every story. And if you're gonna just continue to repeat the hatred and the separatism of your past, of the people of your past, you're just going to keep proliferating this problem. So Mina is breaking the cycle right here. I mean, Damon, when I tell you I'm grasping for straws, but I can do this shit. Okay, hire me to convince people of this stuff. That's what ultimately this was about, was to stop her rampaging. And now she just turned into like a little girl. Now she's just out there observing the world but the problem is the because makes no sense, because they said, hey, we see you and understand you. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like you literally just, I don't know. It was I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed right now.
The fairies are pissed at us, but then the changeling is not pissed at us all of a sudden because they talked her off a ledge. I know that like there's, when we talk about original ideas, yes, there are original ideas out there, you know, In a Violent Nature, which, you know, wasn't my favorite film, but it's a pretty simple concept, but one you're like, yeah, this kind of like it's the same, but it's different. Like it's a slasher, but it's a point of view slasher. We never really seen anything like this before. Okay, that's kind of different. That's kind of cool. Late Night with the Devil. There have been movies about TV shows and filming and things like that, but the way they did that movie is kind of found footage, kind of a documentary, kind of just a, you know, 1 hour long story, really, of like an episode of television. Was a really unique format on something that hadn't quite been done. Talk to Me. Our favorite horror film of last year was a possession film. Now, where do we always see possession films? It always revolves back around to exorcisms and religion. That film had nothing to do with either one of those, and we applauded it because it was a huge different way into possession films. this whole shapeshifter fairy mythology thing, it's not new. There's been versions of this. I joked about True Blood. That was a big part of True Blood was fairies. That was a big part of what, that whole show is about. It's also about shapeshifters. Now, the difference is if you want to watch a movie or TV show about a shapeshifter that actually makes coherent sense and it's much, much fucking scarier, go watch The Outsider on HBO.
Oh, so yeah, that's scary.
Eight episode TV series based on a Stephen King book, starring Jason Bateman. He directed a lot of it. It's an anthology. It's one season, so it's not out, but it's just one season. It's got Patty Considine, who is who did play King Viserys with Targaryen in House of the Dragon. It's got Cynthia Erivo, who's getting a lot of press right now for doing Wicked. Really good cast. Really solid show. Ben Mendelsohn is in it, who's great. He's an incredible actor. That's a show about a malevolent shapeshifter. And it's a fucking scary show. And I'm about to say something that's going to be like the book readers out there are going to lose their minds. I've read the book, the Stephen King book. Sit down. The show's better than the book. Show's better than the book. It is.
It's a real good show.
The book's fine. I like the book. But they made a couple of tweaks and changes in the show that made it better. I'm not saying that's every time, but that's an instance where they made it better. That is about a shapeshifter and a malevolent spirit of a shapeshifter who feeds on misery. Pretty simple concept, and the way it unravels is terrifying through those 8 episodes. It's like one bit science fiction, one bit true detective. It is terrifying. It's a great show. This movie, the watchers can't figure out what it is. Are these creatures malevolent? Are they angry? Okay. But they're studying us. Why are they studying? If they can't escape, if they can only exist at nighttime, why are they studying us because they can't leave? They got a halfling. The halfling lives in there, so the halfling's going to eventually escape and help them. How are you, it's just, it doesn't make any sense.
There's so much stuff, Damon. There's so much stuff in this movie. It probably should have been a miniseries. Honestly, it probably should have been a miniseries so they could actually let some of this stuff breathe. And we couldn't breathe. We got suffocated by all the information that comes out of this movie.
There is no singular motivation for any character in this film, minus Madeline, technically, because she wants out. But even that, we don't really fully understand because the whole reason the watchers, her people, are watching us is so they can become us. But they can't escape the fucking woods, so what's the point? That's what I'm saying. No one's motivation makes sense in this. None of it does.
It doesn't, but it does remind me of 2 things. One is that it's so all over the place. There's so much shit going on. It reminds me of my kids' video games. Like, my kids play Five Nights at Freddy's. There's like 10,000 things on the screen at once. It's never it's not like any video game I've ever seen. So like when there's 10,000 things at once, young kids are like, oh, cool. There's so many things to think about here. I love that. 2, the ending is very different. Even than the Outsider, I think, is just like, that's malevolent. There's a demon. Stop it. Like, that's the plot. Stop the evil thing before it kills. This is not that. This is for a new generation that says, like, there's 2 sides to this story. Just because we've been telling it from the side of, like, humans doesn't mean our side's the right side. Which is it's a new idea, Damon. It's a totally new idea in horror. Did it land here? No. And I'm in categories, I have an idea of how it might land. It didn't land here because it threw way too much shit at us, and it did not make that the through line. It did not make that the theme of the movie. If it had made that the theme of the movie and not just revealed it in that last 10 minutes, it might have landed. I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. We thought the whole time we were the good guys. Truth be told is that we betrayed them a long time ago. You know a movie that does that? Hellboy 2. Hellboy 2 is about the battle between fairies and humans. And ultimately, one of them just had enough. The fairy was like, dude, I have enough. Like, we live underground in sewers because of you guys. So I'm hitting back. And then the good guys, Hellboy and his crew, were like, hey, you can't just hit back. Like, the world's more complicated than it was. That's sophisticated shit. It is, but it's essentially the same story. It's just told much simpler in that movie, and that's a lot. There's a lot going on in that movie, but the theme is very easy to understand. We're all outsiders. We've all done some wrong shit. We're all living in the decisions of the people that came before us. So I'm going to give them credit, but I'm also going to say, hey, but also it needed to be there the whole movie. You can't just show it to me in a 5-minute sequence and go, see. It's like, no, 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 no. You had to weave it through this whole thing.
Yeah, they created too many problems that they didn't have a solution to. The Watchers were watching us to become us, okay, but then why would they kill us? Why could they only come out at night? And if they can only come out at night, how do they ever hope to escape this place? And if they're hoping to escape this place, why do they need to mimic us? It makes no sense.
Yeah,
it's like going in
a whole lot of too
circles.
much.
It's like the whole it's like the old who's on first thing.
Oh
the
yeah,
Abbott
yeah.
Costello thing. Like who's on first? No, what's on second? No, what? No, who's on first? What? It's like the mental gymnastics. Like okay, they watch us to become us, but they can't leave because they can only go out at night. So if they can't leave, why do they care about becoming us? It's just it's like mind-boggling the story in terms of like what the purpose here is. And yeah, it makes no sense. Sorry, it bugged me in the movie, and as I'm sitting here talking about, it's bugging me even more because I don't understand like what they were trying to go for. It's like again, the premise is far better. I know I say this a lot on when I talk about movies that bug me. The premise is better than the execution. I feel like they came up with a cool idea of like Watchers watching humans in this building. Ooh, that's kind of cool and creepy. And there's these humanoid-like creatures. Then they had to just start adding in all this clunky mythology as to why it's happening versus just simplifying it. There's creatures. They're voyeurs. They're watching us because they kind of get off on watching humans. Whatever that activity is, doesn't have to be perverted, but just saying they get off on that, and that's why we're trapped in there. Give these people a reason to get out. They gotta get back to their kids. They gotta get back to their parents. They just want out. They're claustrophobic. Like, why didn't they have one of these characters be claustrophobic? That would have been an easy like little tool to throw in there, like someone really panicking being in a closed-in space. Didn't do that. None of these characters had a reason to escape, and it was just to escape. There was no other purpose. And yeah, it's just very clunky. It's just very, very clunky. So,
Clonk.
all right, let's get into categories. I'll be honest, not a ton of categories to get in here because this is not like a real super scary movie, but we do have categories. So let's kick things off as we do each and every week on this show with best performance. Patrick, in The Watchers, who do you have for best performance?
My best performance is from someone we haven't talked hardly anything about. The actor is Oliver Finnegan, who plays Danny. Danny, they don't go into it, but Danny has some sense of neurodivergence. There's something there that makes this whole ordeal actually really difficult for him. What I loved about Oliver Finnegan's performance is that he was really this wild card character that I was like, shit, his impulsivity in these moments is going to get them into big, big trouble. And he did a really good job doing that. And that tension was something I kind of grabbed onto because there was so many things flying at you. You don't know what to grab onto. But I was like, I know that Danny as this character, he worries me because he's just too much all over the place.
Yeah, I thought it was a solid performance. I had never seen him before in anything, not that I can remember, so I thought it was really solid. He was a little, as you say, a bit of a wild card. Also, kind of the smart kid in the room. Like, he's the one who wires up the TV so they can actually get surveillance footage from outside the building. He helps Mina travel down into one of the holes where the Watchers supposedly live. He's like, again, he's the one who decides that like he's done listening to Madeline, and he traps her out in the middle of the woods and runs back inside. And he's like, "Fuck her," more or less. So yeah, he's definitely the wild card, and he kind of creates a lot of the chaos that happens because he is not like he's operating on a different level than everyone else. He's operating on a different motivation, even though we never find out his motivation, and he actually ends up dying. He's operating at a different level than everyone else in this movie. So yeah, I agree. He was solid. For me, best performance, I'm giving this almost like a career achievement award more than necessarily this film, because it's not that this film was bad in terms of performances, but like nothing really I'm being honest, nothing really
Yeah, it wasn't a big standout.
But I give it to Georgina Campbell, who I love. I think she's incredible. I've been a big fan of her since I saw her for the first time in a Black Mirror episode called Hang the DJ, which is an incredible episode of Black Mirror. If you've never watched Black Mirror, it's kind of walks the line between sci-fi and horror, and I mean every episode's different. Some episodes
Yeah.
are more horror, some episodes are more like thrillers, some are comedy. There's a lot of different things in a Black Mirror season, but she is in a very famous episode called Hang the DJ. I think it's season 2 or 3. And that's where I first saw Georgina Campbell and immediately kind of fell in love with her. She was awesome in that show. And then of course she was also in Barbarian. She was the lead with Barbarian along with Bill Skarsgård. So if you've never seen, if you're thinking who Georgina Campbell is, that's who Georgina Campbell is. I really like her. I'm not saying what she did in this movie was totally special. Like, she wasn't bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just like,
Yeah.
nothing really stood out, but I just really like her performances in general. And she seems to enjoy doing horror. I mean, she's now done The Watcher. She did Barbarian, which was a much different film, much scarier film, much more traditional horror film, even though it's kind of a surprising horror film. But it seems like she likes this genre. So, yeah, Georgina Campbell, I like you and keep doing more of this.
Yeah, I'm happy to see more of her in genre. That's about all I can say, because there wasn't much to her character that I could grab onto. I think I'm kind of in the same boat with you.
There wasn't much to grab onto for any character, Patrick. Let's be honest. So, let's move on to the MVP. Our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after great character actor Ken Foray in the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to stop a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. Patrick, for your MVP for The Watchers, who did you give it to?
This time around, my MVP is our cinematographer, Eli Aronson, if I'm saying the name correctly. It's a gorgeous looking movie. Like, the one thing I kept looking at was, God, this movie looks good. I don't know what the budget was, but it looked healthy enough that the production design and the lighting and everything came together really well. But that cinematography was just top flight. And that does make a difference in movies. I don't want to knock low budget movies, because I'm sure I will try to be attempting to make a low budget horror movie at some point down the line. It's not going to look perfect, but the better your cinematography is, the more it sells as something to take serious, if that makes sense. And if this had been done by a lesser cinematographer, you might be like, this movie's not only is this movie hard to follow, it looks cheap too. And this does not look cheap. This movie looks 10 times more expensive than it probably was.
The cinematography in this movie is great, and to be clear, the direction in this movie is great, because the cinematographer follows the lead of the director, and this is where I'm torn on in Ishana Night Shyamalan, because she's the director and the writer. When we talked about Prometheus, which was just a really bad alien movie, we said it looks good, it's well directed. Ridley Scott is a strikingly visual director. He does that. But he didn't write the script. Damon Lindelof wrote the script, and that's who we really had a problem with, the story beats in that movie. This one is kind of like, I'm torn, because it's based on a book, so there's partially there, but then Ishana Night Shyamalan had to adapt it. She wrote it, and she also directed it. As far as direction, cinematography, the look of the film, excellent. That part's amazing. I got no problem with that. It's the story. And so that's where I'm kind of torn on her, because direction, cinematography, look of the film, brilliant, great. Even the performances, great. Nothing wrong with any of that. It's the story, but she's also partially responsible for the story. She wrote the script too. So that's where I'm kind of torn. So cinematography-wise, look of the film, it's brilliant. It's great. So for my MVP, it's weird, because I keep bashing the story, and that's what I had the biggest problem with. I'm giving this MVP award temporarily. I know you're probably like, how are you giving a temporary award? I'm giving this temporarily. I'm giving my MVP award to A.M. Shine, the writer of the original The Watcher's book. And here's why. Here's why I say it's temporary. I've not read the book. I've been open about that. Not read the book. But I did read a lot of reviews of the book, because I wanted to kind of understand, did people like the book? Was it not a well-received book before it became a movie? Because I've seen that. I've seen movies be adapted from books, and the book that wasn't very good, and they somehow turned into a movie, and the movie wasn't very good. And I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense. Like, no one liked the book. Why would you turn it into a movie? There's one writer, one producer, one person who's like, I really liked it, so I'm going to turn it into a movie. That's usually how things work. And that's how things work in Hollywood. And that goes back to like the whole Nepo baby. You're a named director with some pull, and you're like, I like this book. I don't care if nobody else likes this book. We're going to turn this into a movie. And then when it comes out, they're like, yeah, nobody likes this. I read a lot of reviews of The Watcher. And the words and the descriptions I read in most of the reviews were foreboding, great sense of dread, tension throughout the movie throughout the book with these creatures stalking these humans. Now, to be fair, the premise, because reviews don't give you the whole story, the premise sounded the same. So it sounds like Ishana Night Shyamalan very much mimicked what was in the book. She copied pretty much what was in the book. So that's why I say temporary. Because if it's exactly the same, then me and A.M. Shine need to have a much longer conversation about his writing. But all the reviews, I would say 95% of the reviews were like overly positive. It was creepy. It was foreboding. It was dread. It was dreadful. It was tension-filled. These are all things I heard to describe the book. So in that regard, I'm like, yeah, I didn't get any of that in the movie. So if that's the case, the book is full of that and it just didn't translate to the visual art of the movie, that's where I give the MVB, because it seems like people who read this book really liked it. And the book was out before the movie. So this wasn't a movie. Like, there's actually movies that now come out before the fucking book does.
Right.
That's not the case. This book has been out. So it seems like the book readers, for the most part, really enjoyed this thing. So yeah, I'll give it to him because it seems like he created a story people liked. It just didn't adapt well into a movie.
Yeah, I don't know the Ishana, what Ishana adapted from the book or whatever, so I can't really speak on it. I just know that the story that I saw was not, it was too much. It was too much. There's potential in there. We're going to get to that in a moment. There's potential in there, but as of right now, there's everything in the kitchen sink. It's way too much.
And I know you're not a big book reader, but you know as well as I do, there's some stories, comic books, books, whatever. Some stories are better on the written page than they are. They're just not made. They're not made to be movies. And I'm not saying The Watcher shouldn't have been made into a movie. I'm just saying, like, some things you read and you're just like, yeah, this is better on the written page than what you're going to create visually. And so I don't know, maybe that's what The Watchers was. It was a great book and it just didn't really translate into a great movie, I guess.
Maybe. Hard to say.
Yeah. All right, let's move to our next category, and that is going to be Best Scare. Boy, Patrick, I had to mine deep for this one. What is your best scare in The Watchers?
This movie is a little bit more atmosphere and less jump scare. They tried a couple of jump scares here and there. Some of them work, some of them don't. The one I liked the most, I'll say, is when Mina and Danny are out running around the woods, and she decides, like, I'm going to go into one of those holes that Madeline says we cannot go into. I'm going to go in and you're going to help me because I want to know what's going on down there. She goes down there. She finds like bikes and stuff and TV, like items. And again, I don't even know why those items are there. Then it never really ties back to anything. They're just conveniently there. And while she's down there, she can tell that there's something in the darkness right there. And it was a great moment. This is Ishana's direction. There's a great moment where she's looking into the dark and we get her POV and we see the darkness and you don't know what's going to come at you. For that moment of the movie, I was like, that's genuinely kind of scary. Like how they set it up, how they built it, how Ishana put all the beats of that scare together. I thought that was pretty effective.
Yeah, it was solid. That was, one of the more tension-filled moments. Also, for another one of those unanswerable questions, did anyone ever ask, because this is one of those things where you're like mental gymnastics of getting around this movie, did anyone bother to ask how Madeline learned the rules?
No. Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, well, Mina asks, she goes, how does she know all the shit? Why does anyone believe in her?
She's been here longer.
Yeah. I mean, but Mina kind of goes, hey, could she just be gaslighting all of you? Like, how do you fucking know what she knows? Like, you're just listening to her. And that's why she eventually goes down into that hole. And then in that hole, she sees something is coming after her. And she's like, oh, actually, Madeline's not wrong about something being here. Something is here.
Yeah, but again, even then, you're just like, but how do you know? How do you know these rules?
How do you know that these things are here? Yeah, I know.
It's a whole lot of like jumping around that doesn't make sense. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there. It just came to me. I was like, yeah, so you know not to go down the hole. How do you know? Did you go down the hole? Like, what happened? Again, neither here nor there. My best scare isn't one moment, it's more of a scene. I did think this was a pretty good scene. I did like this scene. It's when they get after Mina comes out of the hole and she brings a bike and a video camera and some other stuff with her. Danny ends up hooking up the video camera to the TV and they put it outside the building because they want to use it as surveillance because they want to see what the watchers look like. No one has actually seen what these watchers look like because they're operating in that one-way mirror where they just see themselves as a reflection. It's outside where you can see in. And so when the camera's on, they hear a banging on the door, and it's Kira's husband, John. And he's like, let me in, honey. I'm here. And they all think he's been dead. He's been gone for a couple weeks now, and they're just assume he's dead. And so, like, there's a great tension of, like, when he gets down, you see him, like, you see his legs in the camera the whole time, and he leans down, you see his face in the camera, and Kira's freaking out. She wants to let him in. They're like, you can't open the door. You can't open the door. And then, of course, they eventually, the watchers, you realize that it's actually a mimicked John, and he is actually a watcher who is transformed into John. He's trying to fool them to let them in. But once again, if the whole point is to study humans, why would you want to get in and kill them? Anyways. But that scene, that tension of like Kira desperately wanting to get to her husband and everyone being like, no, you can't do this. I thought it was pretty decent tension in that moment until the big reveal, which, later in the film when you realize the big reveal is their studying is to become us, so why would they kill you? Anyways, sorry, just... Can you explain that? Can you explain that to me?
No.
If they want to study us, why would they come in and kill us?
No, I don't know. Why wouldn't they just imprison us? Like, and then study? Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Sorry, just throwing that out there. Let's move on to remake, sequel, or leave it alone. Dear God, this is a category. This is the category where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we just very simply say, should you remake it, should you sequelize it, or should you just leave it alone? So, Patrick, when it comes to The Watchers, remake, sequel, leave it alone.
Damon, you're going to be surprised. I'm going to tell you right now. I want a remake. I want a remake with Ishana. But what I want is instead for the story to be about Mina being trapped in that box with the professor and Madeline. Kira, as much as I loved, what's her name? And Danny, as much as I loved his performance, they don't add anything to this movie. If she was trapped in that box with the professor and his wife Madeline, and they knew all the rules, and then the twist in the end was Madeline is not Madeline. Madeline is one of these halflings that he has trained to be his wife. That's the fucking twist I'd be interested in. Then you wouldn't have to have these moments where she has to go down in the dungeon and watch literally 300 videos. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's pare this all the way down to her being trapped with this husband and wife in the box. And now that you've pared it down, you can actually streamline and maybe focus a little bit more on Mina's story too, and make Mina's story actually connect with their story. That's my pitch for a remake.
I like your version much better, so I'll just go ahead and say, because usually in these moments, I'll say, remake, there's just so much you'd have to change that it would almost be like an entirely new movie. So that's why I don't generally go remake, and I just say leave it alone because it's just a bad movie, and I'm just not interested in seeing another bad movie. But your version makes a lot more sense, and it kind of reminds me a little bit. I just recently watched, for the first time in years, I watched Cloverfield, which I haven't seen in forever. I forgot, God, that cast in that movie is insane. Like, how many good actors are in that movie? But there's a sequel called 10 Cloverfield Lane with John Goodman, and that is a really solid follow-up to that movie. And it's basically this girl finds herself in this bunker trapped with this guy and this other guy, and he's basically telling her, you can't go outside. Horrible things await you outside. And so the whole idea is there's this tension of should you go outside? Can you trust this guy? Is he telling you the truth? What's actually out there? And so that's a big part of that movie. And there's this foreboding tension throughout the entire movie of is this guy being real? Is he being honest? Is he being truthful? And I feel like if you inject an element of that into this, where Mina finds her way into the bunker and she meets the professor and his wife, and he's like, you have to stay in here with us. You can't leave because at nighttime, these creatures come out and, we're locked in here and now you're going to be locked in here with us. And it's almost like they take her on as a surrogate daughter. And then she realizes that the creature is Madeline, and then she's desperately trying to escape. Guess what that gives her, Patrick? It gives her motivation to get out. Because now she realizes they're trying to trap her there. They're trying to add her to their family, this weird surrogate family. That's a storyline that would make sense. So now she's got it from both sides. She needs to escape the professor and his wacky, not real wife, and she also needs to escape the other creatures on the outside trying to get in. One of which they're maybe going to mimic her and they're going to turn into another kid or some shit. I don't know. That gives her motivation to get out. Now she's trapped unwillingly, and she's got these things on the outside trying to get in and get her as well. That gives her a motivation to get out.
And it even kind of helps that little ending that they wanted, which was the idea of like, hey, halfling, like you've actually been wronged. Like you're on the bad end of all of this, and I recognize that. That would make total sense for me to go, this professor just tried to turn you into something you're not, and that's not cool, and I'm seeing that. Like at least I would like, oh, that all tracks. All the little bits track together. And it's just a matter of like using the right characters at the right time and getting rid of the other characters that didn't help this at all. Like at all.
Yeah, so I'll go with remake, and I'll go with your version of the remake, and like I said, I'll put my little twist in there as far as like the motivation. But yeah. I think that would be a much better version of this movie than what we got in this one, which is, as we've said numerous times, just is all over the place and doesn't make a lot of sense. There's just so many things, and like I said, I think that's my biggest criticism of The Watcher. They create problems that they then have to try to create solutions to. And you wouldn't need the solution if you didn't create that specific, unique problem. It's like, oh, we have a cool concept for people trapped in the woods and creatures outside. That's pretty simple. Then you start throwing in all this clunky mythology, and it just bogs down the movie, and it just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I mean, that's the biggest problem in this movie. Like I said, it just doesn't make sense. Patrick, next category, can we survive this horror film? This is a very interesting one for this movie because, boy, oh boy, did this give you a lot of options. So, Patrick, when it comes to The Watchers, are we surviving this horror film?
No, I'm not surviving this horror film. One, I just cannot be locked in a small room with a piss bucket with a bunch of people. I'm too antsy. I got to be out in the world. I got to do things. I can't be bottled up. So I'm going to break I'm going to be one of the first people to break. And I will get eaten by fairies that are trying to study me, but decide to eat me instead. I'm definitely not making it out of this movie. Just on that alone, just on just being like, I don't want to be in a room with a bunch of people I don't like.
So I'm going to say I would survive based on two things. One, I'm going to figure out pretty early on, is this forest magical or is it not? Because they never explain that. You can't really get out, but you can get out. That makes no sense. Once you're in, you can't get out. Then what is it? Oh God, it just makes my head hurt. If the forest is magical and you can't get out, then why do they need to trap you there? And if it's not magical, then why do they have all these point of no returns and like you just seemingly can't get out? It's just a mind-boggling, stupid plot. But I'm going to say I will survive based on a couple of things. One, I'm going to find out really early on is this a fucking magical forest or not. I'm going to keep walking and trying to figure out there's got to be a way out. Because if they're trying to trap you there, they're afraid of you leaving. If you can leave, there's got to be a way out if they're trying to trap you there. Otherwise, what the fuck's the point? If it's a magical forest and you can't leave, then why would they trap you there? I'm going to find that out early on. One of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to get the fuck out or they're going to kill me. So there's one of two. Second, I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm going to figure out pretty early on that there's a fucking hatch underneath this rug. I would look for a hatch. I would look for anything in that house to be like, okay, they say there's power. Where's the power coming from? I would follow the cords. At no point do they actually follow the cords to see where they go. That would be my first thing. There's power generated in this hatch. Where is the power coming from? What's the easiest way to do that? You follow the fucking cords. Where do the cords go? In the basement. Oh, guess what? There's a basement to this place. Let's figure out where it's at. Oh, lift up the rug. It's right fucking there. I would have figured that out pretty early on, which they mind-numbingly do not until way later on, and even then, it's just because the rug moves and they see it. Oh my god! Right at the convenient time when the
It's
watchers are trying to get
very
in.
convenient. Yeah.
So based on that, I'm gonna say I will survive because either A, I'm gonna get out because I'm just gonna walk. I mean, yeah, I guess technically I could die if I don't get out of the magical forest and actually is magical, but let's just pretend it's not magical. I'm going to just keep walking and get my way out of there because fuck this place. Or two, I'm going to get down into the hatch and I'm going to find the professor's videos and I'm going to know I can get out this direction and I can go to the boat and I can get out of here. So I'll say I survived because I'm not going to be the jackass who's going to show up and listen to the one person who just seemingly knows all the rules and never bothered to do any other exploring. It's a whole lot of just like every person who's going to say you're wrong about this movie is going to say just sit back and enjoy the movie, man. Like it's not that difficult. I can't because I can't jump around all the different ways.
This movie is that difficult. That's the problem. There's too much happening in this movie. There's just way too much happening in this movie.
Yeah. So the last category is always, Patrick, is it scary? We already know the answer to this question, but we'll say it anyways. Patrick, is the Watcher scary?
No, it's not even close. It's not even dreadful. It's just baffling. There's so much happening and I don't want to be like, I'm an old fart, I don't understand what's going. Like, I watch complex movies all the time. I watch artsy fartsy movies that don't have answers, that don't give you answers. I dissected more from this movie than they even showed. Can you imagine? I pulled more out of this movie than they even bothered to give us. It's just too much. It's kitchen sink filmmaking, and that never turns out good. It really doesn't. There are some people who love certain movies out there that are like maximalist films, and I'm like, nope, there's just too much happening here.
This is not scary. Let me just answer that question right up front. This is not a scary film. That's why I said at the beginning, this kind of teeters the line between horror and sci-fi and fantasy. It's kind of horror, but it's also kind of thriller, kind of sci-fi, kind of fantasy. So it's not really just settled down into one genre. But here's where the people say you're overthinking this. Because there's going to be somebody who says, you're overthinking this, man. So you're way overthinking this. Here's why I know I'm not. You could make really intricate, difficult to follow plots that you really have to think about and really have to like dig your brain into to understand what's going on. I'm not going to sit here and name every movie like that, but there's a lot of movies like that, and they do make sense. It's not easy to follow though, but it does make sense. This movie, the difference with this movie, so a really difficult movie to follow is like trying to figure out one of the theorems or one of the algorithms in Good Will Hunting. The average person, you and I, would look at that and think it just looks like a bunch of jumbled numbers and symbols, and we have no fucking idea what it is. But to a mathematician, it looks like poetry, and they could figure it out. They could solve that problem, right? Even if it's difficult, they can solve that problem. That's a typical, like, difficult movie to follow, but it has a solution. You may not like it. You may not understand. It may take you a while to get there, but you understand how they get there once you figure out the math of it all, right? The Watchers is a movie that tells you 2 + 2 is 9. Why is 2 + 2 9? It's just 9. But why is 2 + 2 9? It's just 9. 2 + 2 is 4. No, it's 9. Why is it 9? Because it's 2 + 2. But that's 4. No, that's 9. That's what this movie is. It's telling you that 2 + 2 is 9, but they don't want to tell you how they got to 9. And when they try to explain it to you, all they say is, but hold on now. Whoa. Don't overcomplicate this. 2 + 2 is 9. And by the end of that, you're just banging your head against the desk saying, fuck it. It's 9. I'm out. I can't does that analogy kind of make sense a little bit?
A little bit. I think how I would put it is like they're telling you right out front that 2 + 2 is 9, and they're showing you the evidence along the way, but then they never connect how the evidence gets you to 9. That's the problem. It's like, no, we have evidence. Here it is. Okay, great. So that'll pay off later, right? No, it won't. And that's the problem. Like, it's just another piece of evidence. And then they're like, well, it might pay off in like some supplementary material or a sequel or a graphic novel. That stuff might pay off later.
Yeah.
But it's giving you a really tough thing to swallow and saying, here's all the evidence for it, but we're not going to connect it and we're not going to show you how it all came together. If you can prove to me 2 + 2 is 9 by the end of your movie, I'll be impressed if you can prove it to me. This movie doesn't prove it to you.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you're right. It's like they say 9 is the answer. 2 + 2 is the original formula, but then you -6, you add 4, you multiply it by 10.
Right.
You divide it by 16, the square root of 30, and then that, and now it's 9. But how did you get there? But I just told you. But that doesn't make any sense. That makes 0 sense. Like, that's why I said the simplified version is 2 + 2 is 9. You're not telling me how you got to 9. You didn't show me your work. Not like the old school, like, you gotta show me. They're just like, no, it's 9. I promise you it's 9. But how? Why? I don't, it's trust me, it's 9. That's what, like, at the end, I'm just like, it's not though. It's not fucking 9.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's The Watchers. It's in theaters now, so there's been.
Yeah. Support your local theater. You don't have to support The Watchers. Just support your local theater.
People are like, you're giving that endorsement now? Yeah. It's just one of those movies, man. It's full on mental gymnastics the entire time. When I walked out of there, I was just like, really? So, anyways, yeah, The Watchers in theaters now. Now, real quick, special announcement to end the show. You'll notice we always number our episodes. We've had a couple of like trailer reactions and other things stuck in there, but we always number our actual review episodes. This episode, The Watchers, is episode number 199. Now, people are like, dude, you really didn't like this movie. This is where you're going to celebrate 199. This is just how it fell. But we are going to celebrate episode 200. Very special episode. We actually did a special episode for episode 100 as well. That was when we kicked off our Nightmare on Elm Street series. This time around, we are doing a very special episode for episode 200. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You have to tune in next week to find out what it is. But I'll tell you this. It's a movie that is a very formative, special movie for both Patrick and I. And I'll tell you ahead of time, it's a movie we both love. This is not going to be The Watchers or even...
It's going to be the opposite of today's episode.
Yeah. I actually still get comments from people who listen to our Lost Boys episode, which was like a 2.5-hour episode of us just full on filleting that movie. People are like, I love that because it was just great to hear you guys just fawn all over that movie. That will be episode 200. That is a movie we both adore, we both love. I don't want to tell you what it is. I want you to wait for the episode, but it is a movie we both love and adore, and it was very important to both Patrick and I growing up. So there's your clue. That's going to be episode 200.
If you have been one of those listeners who's been like, oh, they've been so negative about movies recently, where's the evidence? Oh, only tonight's episode. Episode 200 is going to be a full-on love fest. It's going to be a celebration of a movie that we both absolutely adore. Is an incredibly formative movie for the both of us. And that is not going to be like The Watchers. It is going to be a lot more like The Lost Boys, where we just absolutely fawn over and adore a movie as best we possibly can. So come join us for episode 200, where we talk about one of our absolute favorites.
Yeah, this is like a shared favorite movie, and this is it's gonna be fun. I'm like actually literally excited. I'm like, ooh, I can't wait because we talked about this a lot, but we're like, it's got to come at a special time. When we got to episode 200, it's like we got to do something special for 200. Now we are about to get into a very busy month and a half ahead because we have A Quiet Place Part 1, we have Maxine, we have Long Legs, literally over a 3-week stretch, like bang, 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 1 week after the other. We were going on like a stretch of new films, and that's right into August. There's a lot of stuff coming out in August as well. So we got a lot of new movies, so it kind of timed out perfectly. We had like 1 week where there wasn't anything new coming out, and now we can do this special episode for episode 200. So tune into that next week. That'll be a full-on love fest, and Patrick and I just absolutely fawning over this movie that we absolutely adore. So that will be a fun episode. As always, we want to say thank you to everyone that tunes into the show. Make sure you check us out. If you want to check out the podcast, the best horror news, anything out there, check out the website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. It is now operating, is up and running. We have trailers, we have news stories, and of course the podcast is over there as well. So go to rewindofthelivingdead.com and check us out for all your favorite, best horror news, reviews. We're going to have opinion articles. We're going to have all kinds of cool stuff over there, features. It's just now up and running, but it's going to be adding more and more each and every week. So make sure to go over there and follow rewindofthelivingdead.com. You can also follow us on all your favorite social media media channels. Just follow Rewinded Living Dead. We are on Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. As I said, just search Rewinded Living Dead. You'll find us over there. You can also find us on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, and you can actually see our reactions or see the smoke coming out of our ears as we talk about the Watchers. That's a fun time. And you can also send us emails. We love hearing from you guys. You can send us emails at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That is rot. livingdead@gmail.com. Send us messages. You can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin. You are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in the show. We will be back next week with our 200th episode, our celebratory 200th episode. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you then.
Peace.